Hello, everyone. We are glad to have you here on the fourth session of Dev2Be. So, we are super excited to introduce you to Ali Mazaheri. Ali has been a part of Microsoft for the last 14 years, and he's currently the director at Microsoft Technology Centers, Denver and Irvine. And he is the co host of Simply Tech Live too. At Simply Tech Live, the session focuses on Microsoft priorities, its partner ecosystem, and other customer initiatives and focus areas. Welcome, Ali. The Dev2Be team is highly privileged to have you here.
Likewise, I'm glad we finally made it. I know we went through a lot of back and forth to schedule between the both sides and the time zone difference, but super excited to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Dev2Be is what message you have for the current tech learners, and also asking you about your journey as a tech enthusiast. So, we little cliche questions, but yeah, we would love to listen to the answer of these ones. So, the first question that we have is, how did you land at Microsoft, and was it always on your dream list, or it has just happened that Microsoft gave you an offer?
Great question. So, yes, I've always been a fan of Microsoft, even before I joined Microsoft. And at the time that I got the offer from Microsoft 14 years ago, I was working at Intuit. And back then, even though the team that I was working with and I was managing, we were using .NET, the Intuit team came to us and told us that, hey, you know what? It's time for you guys to move to Java platform. Even though, I didn't have any issue learning Java, but basically they were asking me to throw away all of my investment in Microsoft and completely start a journey in a different platform. Coincidentally, I got the offer from Microsoft, and that was perfect timing. And that's how my journey started with Microsoft.
Wow, that's interesting. So it's been like 14 years. It's a long time. How has your journey been so far, and what's the favorite part?
Perfect. Yeah, so what I can tell you, I've been in various roles. So when I first hired by Microsoft, I was a senior consultant. Then in a couple of years, I moved to principal and architect role. So that was more on the delivery. So I was working hand in hand with customers. There were lots of good and highly visible projects, but that required a lot of traveling. So I had customers in New York, even though I was living in Southern California, so I had to get on a plane every week, meeting with a customer. We actually had an offshore team in India as part of the Microsoft that I was working with as an architect. So that was good, but it was putting the toll, especially because our kid back then, he was 1 year old. And eventually, I kind of switched to a different role, more on the technical pre-sales. And that's how I joined MTC, the Technology Center. And at the beginning, I was a little bit concerned because I'm a geek. As you can see, I have my GitHub hoodies right now. I write code. And I just wanted to make sure that I'm not going to lose that touch, right? But the good news is, I've been doing coding ever since I joined MTC, and I'm working with the highly talented architects all around that we work with customers day in, day out. So far it's been great. One thing I want to add is, especially ever since Satya became the CEO, Microsoft is now a completely different company. Then the culture, the inclusion, putting empathy in action, these are all the things that I care dearly and personally. And I think this is going to be the best job for anybody in the tech industry to work in this company and with this culture that he brought to life.
Wow, that looks like you're the Microsoft lover we usually are. In the Microsoft Student Learn Partner are totally interested in knowing how Microsoft developers work and how their life is as a Microsoft techie. And yeah, simply defines the work you do is super interesting. Intrigued. So what was the motivation behind the podcast you started? You're co-hosting Simply Tech Live, and what is it about?
Good. So I'm a big believer in using social media to convey messages and share best practices. I used to do a lot of blogging. I do it, less frequently right now. but I'm very active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Now, something that happened about 5 years ago, which kind of changed my even direction in terms of how I look at technology, not only to work with the customers, but also in my personal life. So I have a son, as I mentioned earlier, and our son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes about 5 years ago, out of the blue. And this was something that we didn't expect, both me and my wife. So what happened back then was basically starting figuring out what we can do using technology to be able to make this condition a little bit easier. Back then, he was 9 years old. And I know that you guys had a conversation with Scott Hanselman as well. This was where I got involved with Scott and a bunch of other people outside of Microsoft to start working on an open source solution to help managing diabetes. Eventually, that effort turned into building an artificial pancreas. And Sam was the first kid that started using that. So Derek, after he joined Microsoft, so we started working together, and he heard the story. And at one day, he also has a podcast called Dev2Be, which definitely I highly recommend people to follow if you're listening to podcasts. He reached out to me and said, hey, why don't you come and talk about your story and, how you use technology and cloud to build all this open source technology with people outside Microsoft. So we did a session, and I will send you guys a link to that talk as well. And after that, we said, hey, why don't we do this together and let's come up with this idea. So LinkedIn Live still is in beta, but we use that platform, and we started working with a company called Social Life to do this broadcast and these shows with a focus, as you mentioned, in various type of technology-related topic, like women in technology, diversity and inclusion. And this October, that's going to be our 1-year anniversary of running this show. So I'm hoping one day soon we can have you all as a guest as well. Why not?
That's so sweet of you. I'm really glad to listen to that. And really, your son is a hero. As I also saw that written on your LinkedIn. And yeah, it's totally amazing. Like at this age, at this point of time, at so early, having such a problem and then adjusting it and making it a part of life so amazingly, it's commendable. I'm really...
One thing that, I always tell people when they ask about, how did you guys start it? So initially, when we decided to do this for Sam, she came to me and said, are you crazy? What are you doing? I said, hey, let's just see what's going to happen. I remember the very first iteration of this system. It was running on a Raspberry Pi, and I was debugging the code while the system was connected to Sam and his insulin pump, like 12 a.m. That's the only way you can debug the code, right? But we did that, and fortunately, after we went live and we announced it on Twitter and everybody else that, hey, we're using this for Sam, it made a lot of other families and parents a little bit more comfortable, and they started doing the same thing, and eventually that turned into having 2 people on the system back in 2015 to having more than 4,000 or 5,000 today that they're still adding to it. And again, like any other open source, everybody's paying it forward.
Yeah, I'm really blown by knowing this, and it's tough to make it a part of life, and then getting comfortable with it, and then you were the one who was taking risk, and it really was risky, and someone would be afraid of it. So yeah, it's actually commendable, and that's very courageous of your son and yourself. And so, as you mentioned, you write a lot of blogs. So what are they about, and how did you start?
So blogging started when I was working as a consultant. I used to do a lot of back-end SharePoint application development. So I was really focusing on SharePoint and workflows. Then it kind of transitioned to Azure. So then after that, I did a lot of Azure blog posts and, of course, open source technologies. And But because now I'm managing 2 centers and I have like a large team, of course I'm going to use it as an excuse. I have to do more blogging, but that's something that I always have passion. And I think honestly nowadays, broadcasting and having podcasts probably has more impact because more and more people there are getting busier at job and the work that they do. So listening to podcasts probably is going to be more impactful than just go and reading a long blog.
Yeah, that's true. So you have been monotonous when you wrote blogs. You have written a lot of blogs. So was there a point when you felt like, no, that's like I've done with my part of blogging and I just stop, or maybe do something else, switch it off, or like you said, podcasts are more, but you still write blogs. So what is that has impacted, like how blogs has impacted the entire journey?
I would say blogging is one of the best way for anybody to first share. So if you go and invest your time and you learn something, let's go ahead and share, right? It gives you the platform for you to get feedback, constructive feedback, to even, get better at what you do, and also helping you to build this community. So, just putting a blog post and, publish it is not going to be enough. You have to make sure you're going to engage with your people that put in comments. And that's something that I admire Scott Hanselman, to be honest with you. He's been, doing all of this on, and sometimes I joke with him, how can you do your day job? But of course, he's just awesome. He's one of my few favorites, to be honest with you. Everybody's favorite. But for me, it's really right now at a point that after I switched from the individual contributor inside Microsoft to become a manager, now I have different priorities. So that's something that, if I have the motive to write blog that I know somebody like you or anybody else can benefit from, I will definitely do that. So I didn't shut down my blog site. It's still there. It's in the wild. I still get, feedback and comments from posts that I did 5-6 years ago. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to come back. So I would say blogging is one of the things that is going to help you develop your skills, helping building your community around you. And of course, you have platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter that you can share more broadly. And that's something that I definitely recommend for anybody.
Totally. That's right, because when Scott came to Dev2Be and when he talked about he's like you said, he's very continuous about podcasting and blogging and doing everything along with the work itself. So it was quite a show that too. We learned a lot from Scott, and we are currently learning from you. It's really great to have such people around and know such great journeys. So what's your message for the current geeks, like the 2020 batch or the 2021 batch, and how do you think that they should cope up with the situations that we have currently going on?
Absolutely. So what I recommend is, first, you need to have passion. Second, think about how the work that you're doing, which is writing code, designing a solution, is going to impact the work around you. For me, my background, I have a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics and computer science. And it's interesting that till the time that Sam was diagnosed, and I started to kind of getting back to the roots of the math problems and statistics and things like that, which is 100% directly related to type 1 diabetes management, because it's all math and calculation. I was always thinking, why did I went to college? Why did I spend my time? I'm not even using any of those stuff that I learned. But you never know. 30 years later, all of that came into a use and for a purpose. So always try to have that in mind. What's going to be the impact? And the other part is, that's something that probably 10 years ago was not a norm, but these days, getting involved in open source solutions. I think GitHub provides a lot of capabilities, especially for students and people that they want to have a career in software engineers and computer science. Use those, build a community around you, get involved, Don't be afraid to, send a pull request. I mean, that's the area that you can, build your networks, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So we have a fire question round, and we would like to ask you a few favorites of yours in this. And so, so the first question is, so what's your favorite album, the music album that you like the most?
Dark Side of the Moon. I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan. So I have a vinyl collection. I love all of their albums, but Dark Side of the Moon is the one that I usually listen to, especially when I'm coding or just hacking something. It's awesome.
That's great. I guess every coder, every geek has an album that's favorite, and that's the album that geek listens to all the time when he codes. Yeah, that's true. So who's the favorite singer?
My favorite singer and composer is Roger Waters, of course. I'm a Pink Floyd fan. There are a couple of others like Andrew Latimer. I listen to Camel. But these two are my favorites.
Okay. So what's the favorite game? We all have one. I'm sure you have one.
Favorite game? I'm not a gamer per se, even when I was a teenager. Even though back then we didn't have Xbox. But my son, he is an avid Star Wars player. So Battlefront is something that I really enjoy watching him play, and sometimes I play with him, not all the time.
That's great. So also the question, because you mentioned that you traveled a lot. So what has been your favorite place to visit until now?
Bahamas.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the trip that we had. It was an award that I won back in 2015. So it was a company sponsored trip, and Bahamas was great.
Okay. So what's the most blissful activity in your job? Like every day you wake up and you feel like, I'm going to do this, and you're excited about that. What's the most favorite part?
Well, unfortunately, because of the COVID, most of the activities that I used to do, you cannot do it. I used to go to gyms and things like that. So for me, waking up early around 6, going for a long walk, and then having my espresso, that's the only thing that I do outside of being with the family and work.
That's great. So thank you so much, Ali, for the kind gesture of accepting our invitation and sharing with us your story. So anything that you would say as the ending note?
I'm just kind of admiring what you and the team are doing. You guys are going to be the future, and people that they're going to make a difference. And I can't wait to one day see you guys officially join Microsoft, and we have the opportunity to work together.
Thank you so much, Ali. That's really appreciated. And so wrapping up this session, everyone, we do have our previous sessions in the link below, and the amazing stories of developer at Microsoft. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next session. Thank you.